healthy habits for the One Kidney Club. And I think most of us have one kidney in this group. All right, I'm just going to jump right into it. So I am a registered dietitian. I work at the VA Medical Center in Milwaukee. I've been there for actually just celebrated 35 years, including my internship, which was at the Heinz VA in Chicago. So I have spent my entire career at the VA hospital learning from veterans and having the privilege of serving veterans, and they are a wonderful, wonderful group of people. The gentleman in this picture is not a patient of mine. It's just a picture I found on the internet, but this guy would fit right in the dialysis unit where I work. I work with veterans of all stages of chronic kidney disease, from the early stages on, and actually a lot of them, when I see them, have no idea they have chronic kidney disease. I might see them in other settings. I work inpatient as well as outpatient. And so I see patients that are maybe admitted for heart failure, or maybe have had some acute kidney injury, but with some underlying chronic. So I see quite a few different diagnoses. I'm definitely not a doctor. I don't pretend to be a doctor, but I read a lot of doctors' notes. So I feel like I've learned a lot just from talking to doctors over the years. To move on. Having trouble advancing my slide. Here we go. So this is a picture of myself and my living donor, Monica. We are 8 years out from our surgery. We met in 2009 when our sons were both at Milwaukee Lutheran High School. We met at a mom's prayer group of all things. Monica suffers from lupus, but actually I should say she's not really suffering from it anymore because the kidney transplant has actually put her lupus in remission, but her kidney disease was caused by lupus. And when I met her, she was going through chemotherapy. And by the time, after a number of years, it was becoming evident she would need dialysis. She did spend about 2 years on dialysis. And I sort of had this bright light bulb come on in my head, kind of a fantasy that maybe I could be a donor to Monica. But then I found out, she's got a different blood type than me. She's type O and I'm type A. So there's no way that could ever work. Come to find out that actually we were able to do a direct donation, which is another story for another day. But this has really solidified our friendship, and we went from being good friends to being kidney sisters, and our families are integrated, and it's just really, really an amazing thing. So what do the kidneys do? So each of us, I think it's good to be reminded what that gift is that you gave and what that gift is that you still have. So that is one really, really vital organ that you have in your body. Most of us think of this when we think of the kidney function. This is a picture I took in Finland. I posted this on Facebook the day of our transplant and said, Monica, okay, let's do this. This slide gives an idea of where the kidneys are in the body. They are very, very highly vascularized organs, lots of blood flowing in and out. And that depends on really, really good, making sure that you have a good vascular system. Your blood vessels, your heart need to work well. We need to have the ureters draining that urine out through the bladder, and we want to make sure that things are flowing and nothing is backing up back into the kidneys. So these organs really impact each other. So the kidneys have a lot of functions, and this may be a review. The kidneys are very, very excellent. If you've got good kidney function, they are very good at keeping your blood levels of electrolytes at the perfect balance, which your heart needs, all your muscles need to continue beating properly and working properly. Your body wants to have that right balance of sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium. And then they also maintain the correct volume of blood, of fluid in your body. So they remove the exact amount of fluid that needs to be removed. If you're getting a little bit dehydrated, maybe not taking enough in, they get very, very good at concentrating urine to keep you from getting, from really feeling those signs of dehydration. And then if you consume a lot of fluid, they'll just excrete a lot more. They also excrete those waste products. So when you eat protein in your diet, you generate urea, and those kidneys are really good at they remove that. If they don't do their job of removing that urea, it can make people feel really, really sick. Then some lesser known functions of the kidneys would be to maintain blood pressure control, and then also to synthesize that erythropoietin, which is a hormone that tells your body to make red blood cells. And then they also are involved in bone health. So they specifically they help metabolize vitamin D so that your intestines can absorb the right amount of calcium. So it really is involved in a lot of things other than making urine. Then they also help to regulate blood sugar and remove drugs and other substances from the body. So the functional unit of the kidney is called the nephron. And all of us were able to donate 50% of our nephrons, and we probably barely even notice it. If you didn't know, you wouldn't even know, other than the scar that you have in your body. That other kidney is really picking up the slack and doing what it needs to do. But there might be a little bit more stress on that one kidney that you have, depending on what's going on with your health. I just want to give a quick example of a patient who was able to somehow ignore his symptoms for a very long time. So he came to the hospital. He was an inpatient when he fell and broke a bone. And then in the ER, they drew some blood and they said, "Sir, you're going to need to start dialysis immediately." His potassium was through the roof. His blood pressure was uncontrolled, and that was probably what destroyed his kidneys. He had not been to the doctor in a very long time. He was feeling tired and weak and no energy, but he's just sort of chalked that up to getting old. And so he was sick to his stomach, he was malnourished, and all these things are sort of consequences. He was very anemic. So all the consequences of completely ignoring the kidney function until it's near death. So really important to not let that happen. So the risk factors for chronic kidney disease are diabetes and hypertension are really the number one and number two. And I would say virtually every single patient that I have in the VA dialysis unit has diabetes or hypertension or both. Cardiovascular disease goes hand in hand with that as well. So a lot of the patients I see in my heart failure clinic are already in stage 3, and sometimes they don't even know that. They have no idea. So it's just good to kind of give them an idea of that right away so they can be working on that. And then this slide I just have in here just to show how all these organ systems impact each other. So the heart beating properly and the blood vessels pumping to the heart is from the heart to the kidneys is really important. And then the pancreas keeping that right balance of insulin to protect the blood vessels from getting damaged. So all of these things impact each other. The bladder, we want draining urine, otherwise it might back up and damage the kidney. So these organs don't operate in isolation. So what can we do to stay healthy? Number one is really to have that annual physical. Get the blood tests, get the urine tests, get the vital signs. Make sure that you are still in the state of health that you started out in. As we get older, these things may start to get compromised. So I'm 8 years out from my initial surgery. I can tell you that the doctors had my transplant team had some concern about me. I was 49 when the surgery happened. And so a little bit on the younger side. I think what I've heard is after the age of 50, it's a little bit less concerning. If you've got some health problems, they can kind of overlook them a little bit more. But the younger you are, the more years you have to live with your body. So I had normal serum creatinine before my donation, but then after, my phone is ringing, sorry. I'm gonna just cancel that. So after the donation, my creatinine did go up a little bit, and it stayed that way for 8 years. It's been about 1.01 to 1.02. Nobody's terribly concerned about that. It is just sort of sorry. It's just something that I need to keep track of. And then having a urine test to make sure that you're not spilling your protein or sugar in your urine. That is never normal to have protein or sugar in the urine. And then making sure that the blood pressure is well controlled. I am on a small dose of a blood pressure medication. I do have a family history of high blood pressure and coronary artery disease. And now that I've got one kidney that's trying to do the work of two, we want to make sure that the pressure inside the kidney is not too great, where that would be damaging to those nephrons, which could cause damage and then also cause spilling of protein. So this is just something to really, really stay on top of. And then for men, especially if you've got prostate problems, we want to make sure that the urine is not is draining and flowing out and not backing up. We also want to talk about any over-the-counter herbals or over-the-counter meds that we might be taking. So annual physical, number one. Number two is if you have chronic disease, we definitely want to stay on top of that and manage it. Whether it's hypertension, we want to be monitoring it, taking the medications. If you've got diabetes, we definitely need to maybe checking that hemoglobin A1C to make sure you're in decent control. Really just stay on top of your chronic conditions. Heart failure or heart attack could, or coronary artery disease could set you up for heart failure, which then could impact blood flowing to the kidneys. Smoking cessation, just watching the substances that you might be using, and then avoiding excess use of ibuprofen. So managing the chronic disease. And my favorite part is the healthy eating and lifestyle, which is important both for the prevention and the management of chronic kidney disease. So I myself actually am in stage 2 chronic kidney disease. Nobody's terribly concerned about this. I do follow with a nephrologist. This is not unexpected. It is something that adds a little bit of stress to my life just whenever I go in for my blood work, just to make sure it's staying stable. But I can't say that's anything I would know if I didn't know. So it's just important that certainly that I follow this. And so these things just give me all the more reason to follow these things. So just looking at these bullet points, healthy eating patterns and physical activity may reduce the risk for chronic kidney disease. And then they can also prevent diabetes or hypertension, or they may delay the onset of chronic kidney disease. If you do have chronic kidney disease, it's going to be part of the initial treatment, and then it's going to be helpful to slowing down the process of chronic kidney disease. These are just some studies that give you a flavor for what we're trying to achieve with the diet. Kind of looking at, if you just look at some of the titles, high intakes of red and processed meat may increase risk of developing chronic kidney disease, and nuts, low-fat dairy, and legumes may lower risk. Another one is a healthy diet with less sodium and higher potassium associated with reduced risk of mortality. Eating more fruits and vegetables may delay chronic kidney disease. So just looking at these titles. Just in general, looking at chronic disease and food, just kind of taking it in a big, broad sense, we definitely get the sense from different studies that vegetables and fruits are a positive. Whole grains are a positive. A lot of red meat or processed meats are a negative on the health. And a lot of sugar and refined foods and processed foods are going to be detrimental to the health. So our own National Kidney Foundation has dietary guidelines. Now, I'm a real geek on these guidelines. I was super excited when these came out in 2020. The last time that NKF put out guidelines for nutrition was in the year 2000. I remember when those came out, and those were a big deal at the time. That was really, really exciting. But so what they do, the National Kidney Foundation has a panel of experts who review the literature exhaustively. And it's really difficult for a work group like that to find really great studies on diet, because diet is such such an ad lib thing. And it's unless you put people, it's hard to study it on large populations unless you were to isolate them and feed them an exact test diet versus a control diet. It's just really hard. So about the best we can do is to find associations. So it's hard to find strong evidence, but so that you're going to see words like we suggest or they may. It's not going to be absolute. It's going to be very individual for the person. So as I say this, keep in mind that this is not necessarily, we're going to be finding more out with research as it goes on, but it's really hard to prove with that. The best we can do is look at the evidence. So one statement that they do make, if they do make a statement, it's a pretty good example, a pretty good indication that there is enough evidence to say something like this. So with regard to the Mediterranean diet, which we'll talk about in a little bit, the suggestion is that may help improve your lipids, and fruits and vegetables could help decrease body weight, blood pressure, and acid production. And we're talking about acid production in the blood, not the stomach. So blood acidity is improved with fruits and vegetables. And as patients with chronic kidney disease, if it progresses, the blood can get very acidic. So some of those patients have to take sodium bicarbonate, which is like baking soda, but fruits and vegetables have a similar effect and can help slow that progression. Another thing you might have heard of is the DASH diet. So I give this to my patients quite a bit. That stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. I always tell my patients that is not Mrs. Dash. However, Mrs. Dash, the seasoning fits very well in the DASH diet. And it's, again, a very, very heavy in the fruits and vegetables and the plant type foods, moderate in red meats or meats, fish, and poultry, lower on the fat and low on the sweets. The Mediterranean style diet is similar, and that really emphasizes slightly different from the DASH diet. It emphasizes more, including more olive oil. So it's not necessarily low fat. It would be a little bit higher fat coming from natural sources like seafood or olive oil, which is less inflammatory, less saturated compared to what might be coming from other animal products. And then also red wine in moderation. If you're drinking alcohol to begin with, switching it over to red wine could be beneficial. There's been a lot more research about what type of protein is the best. The traditional renal diet was always, well, don't have very much meat, very much protein at all of any kind, but especially don't eat a lot of plant proteins because that's too much potassium, and don't eat too much whole grains because that's too much potassium and phosphorus. That's sort of the old school. What we're finding now, the research is really telling us that we want plants in our diet. And so, in fact, I'm finding myself counseling patients a lot more towards the plant-based proteins versus the animal proteins, if they are in a stage of chronic kidney disease like I am. So really kind of going more towards the legumes and the nuts and seeds, and not large portions of meat, as quite a few of my veterans might want to do, and especially targeting the processed meats. So those helpful habits to protect kidneys. Number one, choose fresh, whole foods, the way they come from the farm, from the butcher, from the ground, from your own garden, with as little middleman as possible, with as little extra chemical additives. Those chemical additives may be sodium, they may be phosphate, they may be artificial colors or things, and those artificial or that might be high fructose corn syrup. Those things can be more inflammatory on the body. We want whole natural foods, variety of colors, deep colors, greens and reds and oranges, which we know is going to be protective of blood vessels, less inflammatory. We want the fiber that comes from beans and peas and lentils and whole grains, oatmeal, barley. We want fruits in the diet, but not necessarily a lot of juices, but whole fruits. So where we're getting the fiber benefit or the seeds. What that fiber is doing is helping to populate your intestines with good bacteria. We want to feed the good bacteria and starve out the bad bacteria. So the good bacteria is going to be helping just with reducing inflammation in general in the body, whereas those bad bacteria, from, if we're feeding that from foods that are more processed, more sugary, is going to feed the bad bacteria, which might be more inflammatory, more stressful on the kidneys. And then getting some low-fat dairy or fortified plant-based milks are good too. And then a variety of protein foods, but I kind of caution my patients not to go overboard. So to really meet your protein needs for the day, probably 6 ounces would be for a lot. It really depends on your weight. It's kind of a weight-based calculation, but 6 ounces or 2 decks of cards worth of meat is kind of a good rule of thumb that I kind of go with. And then getting some natural oils that come naturally from foods like nuts and avocado and seafood. Number 3 is here's number 2. Watch the sodium. That's probably the #1 nutrient restriction that I would recommend for people with chronic kidney disease or anybody with hypertension, and is to really, if you're looking at labels, we want to keep ourselves to less than 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. On a per meal basis, that's about 700. We want to try to avoid processed foods, which may have a lot of sodium additives. And then we want to try to use salt-free seasonings as opposed to salt or seasoning salt or a lot of condiments that are salty. And then we want to try to, again, emphasize the whole foods that we know are naturally low in sodium. Choose plants first. So I like to make a game out of how many plants can I get on my plate. So when I'm making chili, I am using garden fresh tomatoes, and I've got some yellow squash that I'm chopping up in there, and onion and green pepper. And I'm putting in meat, but because I like beef, I really do. But I'm putting in maybe a half a pound of beef instead of 2 pounds of beef. That's just me. And then I'm also getting lots of protein from the beans that I put in there. So I'm draining and rinsing and putting in black beans and garbanzo beans and corn and kidney beans. And then I might put in like a soy. I do have some soy crumbles. I'm a little bit undecided on whether that's really adding much benefit. I'm still trying to think that through. But really just trying to make a game out of how many plants can I get? Can I fill half my plate with veggies and fruits? Another example might be if I'm grilling. So I'm going to try to grill peppers and maybe make some guac to go and maybe with my chicken or steak. But I'm going to fill maybe a fourth of my plate with the meat, and then I'm going to fill lots and lots of veggies on there. And the starchy vegetables count are good too. So potatoes, sweet potatoes, corn, those all fit on this healthy plate as well. Steering clear of sugar, so not completely. I mean, I certainly do. I love my desserts. This is probably my downfall. Very difficult. But the excess calories we do want to watch in order to help maintain a healthy weight and to stay away from to keep the blood pressure under good control and to keep the blood sugar under good control. So if you're prone to diabetes, we really want to watch the excessive sugary beverages and juices, and especially the sugar additives. Stay hydrated. I kind of use 2 liters as maybe a sort of a rule of thumb, but it really varies depending on your size. So a large muscular man will require more fluid than a small, not less muscular female. It really, for us with one kidney, we might find a finer line between being overhydrated and underhydrated. So make sure that we're hydrating if we're out exercising in hot weather. But not overdoing it necessarily. But again, this is where the physical that you have will be helpful. If you're overhydrating, you might find your blood sodium level might be too low. That's a sign that you might be a little bit more diluted in your blood. So just having a conversation with your doctor if you're concerned about whether you're hydrating enough or too much. Healthy pain medication, pain management. I know I was told never to, no, maybe not never, but stay away from ibuprofen. So I take only Tylenol if I need a pain medication. And then getting back into just other healthy habits, not smoking, moderation in alcohol use, getting exercise. I do aim for 150 minutes a week, so 30 minutes, 5 days a week, and just trying to work it in wherever possible. Getting managing stress and getting adequate sleep. So kind of all the things that we need to be doing anyway to stay healthy, we have a lot more reasons to continue doing these things. If you are interested in learning more, the National Kidney Foundation has a great website, as you might be aware. If you go to the kidney.org and then you go to patient and then go to diet and nutrition, and then there's just all kinds of tips, all kinds of recipes, information, just great information to get you started, especially if you wanted to do that more plant-based diet. And then here's some more references. And with that, I will end.